Okay, I hope everyone sees me okay. This is my first time using GoToMeeting. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this fabulous conference, Java Day Istanbul. I'm very happy and glad to be here. My talk goes about migrating existing Spring Boot application into Quarkus. And let me share my screen. Oh, okay, it's already been shared. If there is any issue, please bring me in the chat. So, okay. So, what I want to show here is a personal experience, and the main answer that I need to do is why I decided to migrate. So it seems that Spring Boot is super used, commonly used by several people everywhere, and why migrating an application? Well, in this presentation, you are going to have a bit of knowledge of why I decided to do that. Well, you can imagine that we have several things to do in our lives, so why I invested time in this migration. Okay, seems that
sorry, we couldn't able to see your screen, so I just make you presenter again. Can you share now?
Okay, let me do. Yes, it is.
Yes, now it's perfect. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. As I was saying, here you are going to see, well, what it is Quarkus, for those that do not know what it is Quarkus, and also what can you expect of this presentation, because sometimes we go to a talk and we don't really know exactly what we should expect. So I will make it clear. And then the main question, so why do you need to migrate or not? Because at the end we will see which are the conclusions. So is it worth it to migrate or just simply stay as you are? And obviously I will show which are the steps that I follow in order to do this migration. And in the end, I think this is a very important step, is about seeing a performance comparative between, in this case, we are going to see four options. And at the end, references, because I think, well, those links and those materials help me a lot. So if you want to start using Quarkus or if you want to migrate, then those materials could help you too. So basically, who am I? Well, I'm Java champion. I'm also co-leader at the Barcelona Java user group and co-founder of the JDBC Conf, a conference that we host every year in Barcelona. But for obvious reasons, we haven't hosted on 2020, and now in 2021 we are going to host it online at the end of July. I'm also working as a software engineer at Red Hat in the application modernization and migration team. You can find here at the left, well, the ways to contact me, my Twitter handle, my email, my blog post, where you can find articles about this migration or test containers or how to test Camel, well, different things that can be interesting for you. And my GitHub account, where you can find the repository about this migration and other projects from Red Hat or my personal pet projects. And yes, I'm that guy in the picture being painted as a Miro or something. So what are the expectations that you should have of this presentation? Well, it's my opinion. I'm not going to teach you anything. Just it's showing an experience, a path that I followed. And I expect that if you decide to start a similar path, you find a better approach, and then we can share experiences, and that would be awesome. And this is something also that works, but it's not intended to be the perfect migration. So something that works, something easy, something fast, and then get the numbers and the experience, how it feels to do this. And as I said, this is not the way, but it's only a way. So I will show you 2 different ways of doing things, but you can mix them or even use different libraries to achieve the same. The version of the Spring Boot project is, well, version 2.4.2, and Quarkus is 1.13. We are now in 1.13.4, I think. So, well, these are the versions that I used to do the migration. Okay, so now that you know who is talking to you, now that you know why I decided, or sorry, what can you expect of this presentation? Now let's have a brief description of what is Quarkus. In this presentation, you are going to find several screenshots of retro games that are super, I don't know, super attached to me, because when I was younger than I am now, I played to them a lot and invested a lot of money. So probably they can remind you of all good times. So what is Quarkus? Well, Quarkus is, as the official description says, is a Java, Scala, or Kotlin stack. Kubernetes native because it has a good connection with Kubernetes, and also has the 2 main goals that it is boot speed and low memory footprint, that also can be compiled to native code using GraalVM. So you can run your Quarkus application on the JVM mode, or compile it to native and use it in a machine that doesn't have Quarkus installed. And one of the best things that I find in Quarkus approach is that it is not reinventing the wheel. So if you are comfortable using Kafka or Hibernate or REST-easy, Vertex, well, JAX-RS, several standard libraries, okay, do not learn new tricks. Just simply stick with those technologies, and Quarkus will adapt to that. So I usually think about Quarkus as a technology that happens on build time that you don't really use. So this is the magic for me. I code using standard libraries, but Quarkus is the magician that does the trick. So I usually tend to think about this way. So the Quarkus key facts. Okay, as I said, one of the main things is that it is really fast, and we will see it later. And it also has a very low memory footprint. Also, it's focused on being easy to code. As I said, it's not forcing you to learn new tricks. Also, it's open source. For me, at least, it's a must, I would say. And also, one of the very interesting things is that it has fast-paced releases. So every 2 weeks, every week, you will find a new version, a new extension. Now we are going to see what are extensions. So it's a very dynamic project. There's a lot of people involved, a lot of effort involved in it. So that gives you like a healthy image of a project that you are not going to suffer from being abandoned. So this is a very live project and very dynamic. And it has lots of extensions. So what are those extensions? Well, extensions are simply some libraries that are optimizing and making the, let's say, the open source library to be natively compiled and work fine with Quarkus. So those are extensions, can be Kafka, Camel, Keycloak, Spring, Vertex, REST Easy. Well, here you have several that probably, well, most of you are using one of those extensions. And well, we have more than 150 extensions. So probably there's a little probability that you will not find the library that you are currently using. But again, these extensions are growing and growing and growing. So what I'm saying now, in 1 month, well, I will have to update this number probably, because more companies are going to be creating extensions, and you will find more and more connections with Quarkus. Regarding the fast-paced releases, well, it started lately in 2018. Now we are in mid 2021, and we've moved from version 1 to version 1, so version 0.01 to version 1.13.4. Here in the diagram, you see that at the beginning there were a lot of releases in a small space of time. I haven't diagrammed all the tags, but you can find that there's one minor release every 2 weeks, so it's very fast. About the common used diagram or chart to show Quarkus capabilities, well, if we compare the traditional cloud native stack, it's having, well, around 140 megabytes of memory. And if we go to Quarkus, we are reducing to half of that. That's also important. But if we go to native, we are having 1/10. And you would think, or you would ask, okay, but what's the effort that I need to put in order to move from the JVM to the native? If you're using Quarkus extensions, it's only a matter of adding -p native in the command line. So that's the difference between compiling to JVM and compiling to native. I repeat, -p native. That's it. You can even put a property in order for you to not even have to download or install GraalVM. It will use the Docker image, it will download the image, and it will run GraalVM for you, and the proper version will generate the native artifact, and that's it. You don't have to care about it. So that's super easy. And about the first time response, well, it's about more than 4 seconds to 16 milliseconds. So we are comparing two different, very different orders of magnitude, and then this can make you think, okay, now I can consider that my application can go to serverless. Yes, because at the moment Java was like banned from being used in serverless, just for, okay, if you have 4 seconds to start, it's a lot. But now you can consider on moving to serverless, so breaking your application into functions that are going to pay for the time that they are processing, not for the time that they are waiting. That it is what we do when we deploy something in Amazon, and it's I don't know, a machine or a VM running 24/7. We are paying even for the time that our application is not doing anything. Or even you can increase the density of your cluster. So where you had one application with 136 megabytes, now you can have 10 with this approach. So yeah, at the end is reducing money or increasing productivity, as you can see. Also about the Quarkus status, well, only taking into account 1 month, there are more than 200 issues closed, new issues 126 and around 400 pull requests merged. So that's a lot of work involved. There are around 500 contributors, and as you can see in the work done into the project around from the beginning, you can see that there's a lot of work constantly. So now in the I would say in the latest time, there's even more work than in the beginning. So there's a lot of people involved into Quarkus. So that makes a very dynamic project. And also there's another idea that it is called Quarkiverse, where there's a lot of people, companies that are providing tools, libraries, extensions that are compatible with Quarkus. So apart from those extensions coming from the core, you have other extensions that other people are doing, contributing to the Quarkiverse. So I would say that there's a lot of engaging in this project. Okay, so now you know who is talking to you, what can you expect of this presentation, what it is Quarkus. So now let's talk about the migration. So migrating this Spring Pet Clinic REST application into Quarkus. Again, this game is very attached to me because I never could move to stage 2. And I invested a lot of money, but always in stage 1. So it's very emotive for me putting stage 2. So about the migration. So why? Spring Boot has easy to develop applications. Yes, it's true. But for me, it was long startup times and eternal tests, just because every time that you need to start the context, everything is happening on runtime. Also, I would mention that the main difference with these two approaches is that in Spring, almost everything happens on runtime. With Quarkus, almost everything happens on build time. So that implies that Spring Boot has a lower build time, and Quarkus has a higher build time. But then on runtime, that it is where almost everyone cares about, is the big difference. Also, Spring was creating heavyweight applications with a high memory footprint, and also too many things were happening under the hood because you add 2 different properties in the properties file, and I don't know, a lot of services are starting. That's my experience. And what I read about Quarkus was, well, it is easy to develop applications. That's fine, but it's not super important because easy is a very subjective thing. So some people will find it easy, others will not find it easy. What it is easy for you now, what is hard for you now, in 1 month it will be easy. So, well, that's nice, but not super important. But also, they say it's fast. Well, that's also this thing already attracted me. Also, it's lightweight, so it won't consume a lot of memory. That's fine. And then they say that it is GraalVM compatible, so I can go to serverless or even increase the density of my cluster. Both cases mean less money on public clouds. So that's also another important thing to consider. About the project to be migrated, well, it has the common used libraries: Spring Data, Web, Security, Documentation with Swagger, Actuators, Micrometer, CDI, AOP, and Catch. I would say that most of the projects that I've been involved in that were using Spring Boot had almost all of these technologies. Probably AOP is not so common, but the rest, I would say, are pretty common. In Quarkus, well, we have a relationship between all of those technologies to the Quarkus ones, except for the Spring IOP, because there is no AOP on Quarkus, because as I said, everything happens on build time. So AOP is based on a discovery on runtime. So this doesn't make any sense. Okay, so let's see about the migration steps. Regarding CDI, it's very easy. If you are still using AutoWire, just move to inject. And the pins declaration is using application scope, so it's easy. And also it has auto injection on constructors and lazy by default, so that's very convenient. I didn't find any drawback, any problem on this migration. And well, we can also even define which implementation is going to be used depending on the profile that we are using, or even in a properties file. So that's also very convenient. Regarding the JPA repositories, well, it's a matter of moving from repositories to Panache repository. In this case, I moved to Panache repository base just in order to be able to define which is the entity used for the entity ID, in this case integer, because by default is long. But apart from that, we have the common methods to handle an entity: list, find, persist, delete. Well, that was easy too. The only thing that we don't have are derived query methods. So those find by name and age, blah, blah, blah. We don't have that. So if that's the case, we need to annotate a method with the query, and that's it. Regarding Spring REST, well, it's also easy because we have more or less a mapping one-to-one in annotations, except for the request mapping that we need to break it through. We need to break it into 3 different annotations. But apart from that, it's more like a string replace and nothing else. About the Spring security, that's fine. We are moving from pre-authorized annotation to roles allowed annotation. So it's very, very similar. So yeah, nothing complicated here. Well, I will talk about the drawbacks. In this case, also this project has the security persisted in a database. And for that, we simply add the JDBC Elytron extension, and that's it. We configure how we do this mapping in the properties file, and that's it. It's very easy, and it doesn't involve any coding apart from adding the extension in the POM. About the Spring security, the only thing that I found different is that in Spring we have expressions. So we can check, as I saw you before, here you have has role, and even you can configure complex expressions in order to define the security for that method. We don't have that, and we have like a list of roles allowed into a method, or at least this is the way that I found to do it when I did the migration. Regarding cross origin, well, it's very easy. Just simply add these 2 properties in the properties file, and that's it. It will control the cores into your REST controllers. The only difference is that, well, in Quarkus, I haven't found a way to do the same. But in Spring, you can configure these cores per controller. And in Quarkus, it's at global level. But in this case, it was not a problem. Regarding metrics, well, it's about adding the small right metrics extension, and we will have the system metrics directly. If you want to have custom metrics, well, you are going to use microprofile annotations, and then you will have to add, well, count it, time it for each method that you want to have the metrics in the output. But this metrics is not following the same approach as micrometer on Spring. The notation is not exactly the same, but if you add this property file micrometer compatibility, then you will have the same notation. So that's very convenient. Even you can, instead of using the microprofile metrics, you can even use the micrometer extension, and then you won't have to touch even your custom annotation, your custom metrics in the Spring project. So that's also very convenient. And we don't have AOP to get metrics. In this case, AOP was used to get the metrics on the application in order to connect, to have those metrics on the access to the database, so based on the ORM usage. In this case, we are going to see a different way of doing the same because, as I said, we don't have AOP on Quarkus. For validation, easy. Just going from Spring validation to Hibernate validator, and then we will have also the usual valid and constraints annotations. And moving from a controller advice, annotate a class to an exception mapper. The code for the mapper is basically the same, and that's it. Just simply create a mapper based on, let's say, a top-level annotation, exception, and then it will define which is the response for the REST endpoint, and that's it. So it's very, very easy. Regarding OpenAPI, well, it's the matter of adding the extension OpenAPI, and then you can configure the global information for your API, even on the either on the code using OpenAPI definition annotation in a class that extends the JAX-RS application, or annotating the adding these properties into the properties file. So also very convenient, no code involved. You can have the global information of your API this way. So very easy. The same way, it's also has Swagger UI out of the box on test and dev mode, but also you can activate it on prod, and that's very convenient. The only thing that I didn't found to do it on Quarkus is that I cannot configure which are the REST paths to be scanned. So with Spring, I could define a package to be scanned or a list of packages. So I could hide some REST endpoints. I didn't find a way to do the same with Quarkus. Regarding what I say, security, AOP for getting metrics. In this case, it's very convenient. AOP, if you haven't tried, it's super powerful. As you can see in the left, with a simple method and expression, we are annotating all the methods coming from repository, classes, and subclasses. And we are adding, in this case, is a timer. And yeah, it's very easy. As we don't have it on Quarkus, there are several ways to do it. One is using microprofile annotations to annotate every method, or we can use CDI interceptors to do similar thing, or even easier, we can simply add this Quarkus Hibernate-ORM metrics enabled true into your properties file, and you will have the same. So yes, I know it's a workaround, but in the end, our main goal is to have a function, not focused on the technology. So in this case, we are going to have the same or even more compared to the previous approach. In this case, we are also even having metrics at Hibernate global level. So that's also very convenient if you want to know or see which the healthy level of your access to the database. Also, as I said, there's no expression language to define that methods using the AOP, but we've had the same without the need of AOP. With local caching, it's very similar. It changes the name of the annotation, but in the end is the same experience. We are going to use the cache extension that it is based on a library called Caffeine. We are going to annotate every method with the cache result, and we are going to configure the behavior of this cache in the properties file, specifying initial capacity, maximum size for each cache. Regarding test, this involves more changes. Fortunately, we are moving from mock MVC to rest assured. As you can see, the code is very different, but I prefer the rest assured style, but this is a personal taste. But you need to recode your tests. And also the expression, well, if you use the default one, it's a bit different JSON path from Groovy path, but well, it's very similar. And there's no way of simulating roles, so you have to only inject a user in order to test permissions. With Spring, you can inject directly a role. So, well, this was also a thing that I found. Also, test resources. So in your tests, you are going to use in-memory databases or not. I would suggest use test containers and use real layers, but this is a different talk. In this case, just simply use the H2 database test resource as an argument for the Quarkus test resource annotation, and then Quarkus will start this resource that implies a database, following the life cycle of the test, aligning it to the life cycle of the resource. Very easy. Again, to inject mocks of your beans, Quarkus JUnit 5 Mockito, and then it's very easy. I see there are a few questions in the chat. If you don't mind, I would prefer to tackle them at the end. Thank you. I will go back. So we've reached a point where I see, as you can see in the movie Men in Black, forget everything. So there is an easier way to do this migration of a Spring application. Let's see what it is. Using Quarkus Spring extensions. So in this case, there's an extension for Spring dependency injection, Spring Web, Spring Data JPA, Spring Data REST, Spring Security, even for Spring Cloud Config Server, Spring Boot Properties, Spring Cache, and Spring Schedule. So you don't have to touch your code if you are using those extensions. So for instance, if you are using Spring Web, okay, here are the supported annotations that you can use in your code. So if you're using them, don't touch your code, just simply use the Spring extension and that's it. The same with the Spring dependency injection. There are several annotations supported, so you don't need to touch that code in order to move to Quarkus. Why? Just because the extension is using the interfaces, but the implementation is going to be replaced by Quarkus, so it's going to be generated by Quarkus on build time. So you think you're using Spring, but in fact, you are simply using the interfaces. Quarkus will generate the implementation on build time. The same with the Spring Data JPA, and now we can even use derived query methods, so that's fine. So don't touch your code if you are using the supported things. I have to say that you better check every extension for the things covered and not supported. It could be that you are using or a corner case or a feature that is not yet supported, so then you need to find a workaround. Spring Security, the same, and even in that case, we have expressions allowed on the security for the methods. So now what I'm going to show you is, okay, so if I'm, if I'm having this Spring Boot application, first column, okay, it takes 4 seconds to build, and it creates a 48 megabytes of an artifact. With Quarkus standard, so the first approach that I showed you, it takes 13 seconds and 42 megabytes of the artifact. With Quarkus standard native, it takes 3 minutes and around 100 megabytes. And with the Quarkus Spring extensions native, it takes 5 minutes and around 80 megabytes. The difference between the two native approaches can be because my machine was, I don't know, with more resources. This is a comparative, not exhaustive, simply doing it without considering bigger things. So take it as it is, and what it is important is the order of magnitude of the numbers. But who is concerned about the build time? Mainly because in Quarkus we have the dev mode, where you can just simply run your application in dev mode, and then you can change your classes, and Quarkus will update the artifact that is running. So you don't have to build everything every time that you want to test something. And if we go to the first boot, or the time that it takes to boot the application, considering that it is taking and Hibernate entities and creating the database and inserting rows into it, with the Spring Boot JVM, it takes around 5 seconds, and it consumes, just starting, more than 600 megabytes of memory. With Quarkus standard, so running on JVM, it takes more than 2 seconds, so 2.5 seconds. We are more or less half the time compared to the Spring one. Also, we are consuming around half of the memory compared to Spring. If we go to native with the standard approach, we are going to half a second, okay, and 21 megabytes. We are comparing 5 seconds to half a second, more than 600 megabytes to 21 megabytes. And if we go to the Quarkus Spring extensions native, we are going to 350 milliseconds, so, and 23 megabytes of memory. So basically, no matter the flavor of Quarkus native, you are going around half a second compared to 5 seconds, and 23 megabytes compared to more than 600 megabytes. So this is a huge difference that make you start thinking about different approaches for your Java applications, and even consider not touching your Java team in order to produce artifacts that previously you were using other teams, Python, Node, and others to produce certain artifacts. Now it's time to references. So you know who you are, who we are, who am I, who is presenting this talk. You know why I decided to migrate. You know what it is Quarkus. You know the steps of the migration, not too many, right? And you know the numbers. So let's say 5 seconds compared to half second. Yeah. Now it's time to, okay, for those of you that are interested on doing a similar migration, just follow some references. First, you have here the GitHub repositories links and the Quarkus main website and the Quarkus Twitter handle, and also the developer.redhat.com page, where you will find several tutorials about Quarkus. And also a main thing is the Quarkus, the mailing list, where you can ask the community about your issues or about approaches or about help. Regarding the interactive tutorials, well, you have here this environment called Katacoda. It's not, so it's an external environment that hosts thousands of tutorials. But there are some about Quarkus grouped by different topics, and you can start messing with Quarkus following the tutorial with an IDE and even a terminal or an OpenShift console, everything happening on the cloud, so you don't mess with your laptop with versions, installation, and so on. So that's very convenient to test different technologies. Also, I totally recommend you to follow the cheat sheet for Quarkus produced by my colleague Alex Soto, where you will find all the news for every Quarkus version, with some help and guidance to use every new feature. Also, the starting point for coding with Quarkus is code.quarkus.io, where you will find, a wizard where you can select different technologies and libraries, and it will produce a zip application where you can start your application. And also, if you want to do migrations, I totally recommend you to follow MTA, or as it is called in upstream, WindUp. You can find it on GitHub. It's a tool, a free tool that you can download and use to analyze applications statically, considering a migration path. So you define where the application is and where you want to go. So in this case, there's a migration path involving source Spring Boot and target Quarkus. It will analyze your application and it will give you all the hints and modifications that you need to do in order to do this migration. And it covers several aspects of this Spring migration. And also you will see the story point. So the application is measuring the effort on the change for you to know if this is a big change or a small change. It also gives you the issues grouped by different importance of the change. Also, you can find all the files that are generating issues. And for each file, you will find also which is the code that you need to change, and a guidance and a link to the guide in order to do this migration. Even it has plugins for different IDEs, Eclipse, VS Code, and IntelliJ. And well, I'm part of that team. That's why I'm showing you this tool. Also, I totally recommend that you visit these blog posts where some companies have expressed their migration path from Spring Boot to Quarkus. The most important one could be the Vodafone one, and they migrated from Spring Boot to Quarkus, even going just only on JVM mode. And yeah, that's very, very interesting to read. And that was my presentation. I hope you find it interesting, fun, and again, don't hesitate to ask me questions in Twitter, by email, or visit my blog post. If you have any question, if I can help you on migrating, or if I can help you answering some questions about Quarkus, even if I don't have the answer, I will find it for you. So please ping me if you have any question. And let me check the questions.
Yes, Jonathan, I just forward the question to you. You can just see from the chat screen. If you can't, I can just read the question. Can you see the question?
Yes, I can see it. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so first one is, does Quarkus could support AOP in future? Is there any chance to do it? I don't think so. So the basic goal for Quarkus is to not rely, or rely the less possible on reflection. So you can, I don't see a point where Quarkus will start using AOP, where you can even use CDI interceptors to do something similar. So no, I don't think. Well, I could be wrong, but I don't think a point where Quarkus will handle this. Another question is, is it a good choice to migrate Quarkus if we need AOP? Is there any pattern or approach? Well, as I said, probably if you need AOP, well, in fact, you don't need AOP. What you have is a problem, and AOP is a way of solving it. But probably you can find another way of solving that problem. So in this case, AOP was used to gather metrics for the access to the database, and we solved it using a property in the properties file. So don't rely on the technology, just simply try to get an answer for your problem. Probably, as I said, you can use CDI interceptors, or find other ways to do the same. It could be that there are no ways of doing this, but it all depends on the case. Okay, the same about AOP. And can you please share GitHub repositories once more? Sure, I will share my my slides here. I'm answering. Okay, this is the link to my slide deck. And there you can just simply check all the links for all the tutorials and okay, yes, thank you. And all the links to the repositories. So that's it. And I want to mention one thing is also in the slides, you will find several questions with answers. I'm gathering questions that I receive in meetups and conferences. So probably you can check if you have a question that it is answered there. If not, just send me a tweet message or just simply add a comment. I think people are allowed to add comments and I will try to answer. But one important question that I would like to answer here is, do you recommend always to migrate? My answer is no. Migration involves uncertainty, time, and therefore money. So only consider migrations, not only to Spring to Quarkus, but in any case, only consider migrations that are really worth it. So that the effort is gonna be less than the return. If you are having an application running 24/7 with dozens or hundreds of users, do not think about it. If you are going to have thousands of users and you can divide into micro profile and microservices, and yeah, then just definitely think about it. There's a last question. How would you compare Micronaut to Quarkus? Same reflection-free style, but still offers a very powerful AOP programming model. Well, I don't have a lot of information about Micronaut. I have colleagues that are working on Micronaut, so I totally recommend that you follow them in Twitter and the blog post that they are writing. It's better if you experience it by yourself. I would say that Quarkus rely heavily on standard libraries, and the information that I have is that Micronaut has some things that are particular to Micronaut, and also the reflection approach, I think it's not the same. So Quarkus is not trying to reduce it 100%. So I would say those are two different approaches. Just try by yourself and read about both. And well, I'm a bit biased in order to say something about other approaches, but definitely is also a good thing to check. Micronaut, Helidon, and also Spring is also having native approaches lately. So also consider to check them. And well, I prefer the Quarkus approach, not only because I work for Red Hat, but because I like more the open standard libraries approach. But try by yourself and see the differences. I don't know if there are more questions.
I think no, Jonathan. No questions left. Thank you very much for your great effort. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure, and thank you for having me here.
You're welcome. See you.